Society, National Law University, Orissa, in collaboration with School.in. School.in is founded by Mr. Abhishek Ranjan, the man behind this idea of this conference. Sarkari School is an initiative to build a platform for those working in the field of school education, uplifting the future of younger generation through their hard work, those who are not related to government or any organization but are helping the neglected strata of the Indian society. We have always believed that education empowers freedom. It is an opportunity to make a difference and a weapon to eliminate injustice. RTE has set the education in India free from the hands of the privileged and opened the gated schools for each and every child of the society. We would be shortly joined by the chief guest of the session, Ms. Aparajita Sarangi. She is an ex-IS officer and incumbent member of the parliament from Bhubaneswar. We have with us Professor Dr. Yogesh Pratap Singh as a guest of honor. He is the Chancellor in charge of National Law University, Orissa. Previously, Sir has held the position of Registrar in the Supreme Court of India. Yogesh Sir constantly writes in the field of law in reputed law chronicles, national and international law journals. Sir has also written for general public, contributing recurrently to the New Indian Express, The Statesman, to name the few. We have with us Dr. Aruna Sri Lakshmi. She is chairperson of Academic Coordination Committee of National Law University, Orissa. A keen researcher, ma'am has authored number of research articles and participated in various national and international conferences. She has extensively researched on RTE related to child labor. Also, we are delighted with the presence of Dr. Kunti Rani ma'am and Ms. Nikita Pattajoshi ma'am, the faculty advisors of Legal Aid Society, whose constant support and guidance has helped us to organize this event. We welcome you all. Over to you, Kunti ma'am.
Thank you, Anjali. Good morning, everyone. I first will take your excuse because I am experiencing certain network issues. So maybe my video will have certain glitches. If my voice is not audible, kindly let me know. So thank you, Anjali, for giving a brief overview of the panelists for the inaugural session. And thank you, Abhishek Ranjan. We had a small talk and we had a small discussion relating to this in conference that we're organizing. And thank you so much for collaborating with us. Indeed, it is a privilege to discuss about the concepts and rights pertaining to education, specifically when we are in the 10th year of the implementation of right to education. So, while this conference was in progress, or while we were talking about the conference being organized by, because it has been your brainchild and the collaboration with Legal Aid Society. So we have been discussing, and while discussing the issues relating to right to education, there were certain issues and certain questions that actually, were hovering my mind, and I was a bit curious to know about certain issues. I think maybe we can deliberate on this issue in this conference today. So we have been reading the Right to Education Act. We know about what is education, the concept, the context of education. But I have certain issues, I have certain questions in my mind regarding this bestowed right by the constitution and by the policy makers, like whether the RT Act is really sufficient in realization of the educational rights of children in India, whether free and compulsory education is really feasible in our country, or in a country like India, is it really feasible, whether the schools and the teachers, they are really ready to take up the responsibilities that they have been given or bestowed under this Right to Education Act. Or when you say of free education, is it really free, or whether education can really be free under RT Act, whether it is in conformity with the UN Child Rights Convention, whether necessary curriculum of elementary education and evaluation procedures can be developed. So many interpretations, so many ideas, so many questions that were traveling my mind. So when this conference it was proposed by Sarkari School and Abhishek, I would really give you need a real you should be applauded for this effort. And I will be really happy to hear among good panelists. We have so much of eminent panelists. So without taking further time and without much ado, I would like to invite our chief guest, our guest of honor, Professor Dr. Yogesh Pratap Singh. And Sir is the Vice Chancellor in charge, National Law University, Odisha. Anjali has already given a brief overview of all the panelists. So without much ado, I would like to invite Professor Singh for the inaugural address. Sir.
Thank you, Kunti. Thank you, Anjali, for organizing this program. It's a very relevant program and very relevant topic which you have chosen. I thank Abhishek for collaborating with the Legal Aid Society of National Law University, Odisha. We have a very active Legal Aid Society. We are working in various fields, helping people. So I welcome all the panelists, all the delegates, all participants. We are waiting for the Honorable Member of Parliament, Madam Aparajita. So she will be joining in a while. I got the message. Professor Aruna Sri Lakshmi, Nikita, my colleague, Kunti, and all my students at National Law University Odisha. I thank you for inviting me to this program. Right to education, as a student of constitutional law, as a teacher of constitutional law, when we discuss fundamental rights, we teach and in classroom. And this has been one of the primary objectives right from the beginning when constitution was implemented. And all the successive government, they have kept right to education, providing universal education in one of the top priority. But in spite of all these, if you remember, initially it was a part of directive principles of state policy. But the initial trend, if we see how it was implemented by the government and how it was interpreted by the Supreme Court, as a guardian of fundamental right, it was not very encouraging. Directive principles Supreme Court. Hello. It is judicially non-enforceable. But we find a positive trend when Supreme Court started constructing directive principles of state policy and fundamental rights in a harmonious manner. And that came in late 1970s when Supreme Court said that directive principles are also fundamental in the governance of the country, and it is duty of the state to apply these principles while making laws. So right to education or right to food or right to health is no less than any of the fundamental rights in part 3 of the constitution, which are judicially enforceable. So if your fundamental right is violated, you can directly approach the Supreme Court for enforcement. But your directive principles are not enforced, you cannot approach Supreme Court. So it is at the mercy of the government, and the government has to prioritize that which, because directive principles requires finances. You cannot enforce right to education unless the state is competent enough, financially equipped to enforce right to education. But every government, right from the beginning, they have tried, and finally this and Supreme Court finally realized, and Supreme Court said that right to education is also part and parcel of right to life. So Supreme Court took a different route to implement directive principles of state policy, because this is judicially non-enforceable. But they said that right to education is required to ensure human dignity. And human dignity is the sense of right to life and personal liberty. Right to life does not mean that you are breathing. Right to life means right to live with human dignity. Education is one of the essential component of the aspect of dignity. But in spite of this declaration made by the Supreme Court long back, we find that education was not given due importance. And this is one of the, I guess, this is one of the inherent weakness in the enforcement of Supreme Court judgments. We have several, like right to information was declared part and parcel of freedom of speech and expression long back. But in spite of that, it was not realized unless Right to Information Act was passed in 2005. So right to education was part and essential ingredient of right to life, part and parcel of right to life, fundamental right, judicially enforceable. But in spite of that, it was not given due weightage unless this dream was realized in 2002, the constitution was amended. And first time, we discuss in the class that fundamental rights are negative rights and directive principles are positive rights. First time a positive right was inserted in the fundamental right chapter. Article 86 amendment was made in the constitution, and Article 21 capital A was added in the constitution, which first time provided fundamental right to education as a fundamental right. And it provided that from age 6 to 14, it is compulsory. It is a fundamental right of children between the age of 6 to 14 to get primary education. So first time this was, and this also provided that there will be a followed up legislation, and Right to Education Act was passed in year 2009. I think we completed 10 years of right, and that's why this program is being organized. The act made three major changes. One, it mandated age appropriate enrollment for children. So the enrollment rate was increased, and there is one report that between 2009 to 2016, the number of students in the upper primary level increased by almost 20%. So there was a very positive and big impact of Right to Education Act on the rate of enrollment in the school. The second is feature of this Right to Education Act was that this ensured the qualitative norms. Qualitative norms, when I said, like section 19 of the Right to Education Act, which provided that there will be a specific teacher student ratio, which every school has to maintain. Then you have to ensure on various other infrastructural aspects, like you have good classroom, you have good playground, you have good sanitation facility in the school, you have good facilities for the teachers education, continuous education for the teachers and training for the teachers. The third aspect of Right to Education Act was that it also ensured inclusive right to education. So when we say right to education is a fundamental right, this is irrespective of the socio-economic background of the children. Socio-economic background of the children. So this first time ensured by law that irrespective of the socio-economic status, background, financial condition, the right to education will provide free and compulsory education to all the children. These three important changes were made by Right to Education Act. But in spite of that, as Kunti rightly mentioned, that there are so many questions people raise, that how Right to Education was implemented, how much we have achieved. In terms of enrollment, we can see a positive change. But in terms of quality, whether we have achieved what was intended by Right to Education Act. In terms of quality, we have not achieved the objectives which we intended. We have provided an ecosystem where we can work, but there are many things which I think we have to still work on. And organizations like sarkarischool.com and people like Abhishek Ranjan and the Legal Aid Society and people who are actively involved, as Abhishek mentioned, I think it is a duty of all these people, all these stakeholders, including the national law universities and their legal aid clinics, that we have to work for. We have now adopted a new education policy in 2020, and the new education policy gives much emphasis on early childhood care and education. One chapter is devoted to early childhood care and education, but there also I think it's still a policy document, and government has to ensure that how education policy, prima facie it appears that this is a good policy, but how it will impact right to education, or how right to education act will function within this policy framework, that is another question we I think will ask when people like Aparajita Sarangi and other people will come to this platform, and during this discourse, the whole day discourse, you can discuss, and I hope that all these questions will be answered, all these questions will be discussed, and we can find out some kind of solution, some kind of answer at the end of this workshop, and we can provide some kind of resolution. So I think I should stop here. I welcome all the people, and I thank all the people, organizers, to organize this very relevant program. Sarkari School and National Law University Legal Society. Both the faculty advisors are very active, Dr. Kunti and Nikita. So thank you very much. We'll hear other panel members. And all the best for the other sessions.
Thank you. Kunti ma'am, your mic is on mute.
I'm so sorry. Thank you, Yogesh sir. Indeed, it is actually a treat to hear you on the constitutional perspectives and the right to education, and the interface and many questions that we would be discussing in the whole day conference. It's actually a treat to hear Yogesh sir on the constitutional perspectives. And thank you, sir, for the inaugural address. And we have with us now Madam Aparajita Sarangi. She has already joined us. And we welcome you, ma'am. And it's actually our honor, Legal Aid Society, National Law University, Odisha, and on behalf of the Sarkari School, on behalf of Mr. Abhishek, I would like to extend a hearty welcome to Madam Sarangi. And we have, because I am a resident of Odisha and I have been a sort of, I was a witness to her work in while she was in the Indian Administrative Service. She was also posted in my home district. So we have always looked up to her, and she has been really a very dedicated officer. And the time she has joined, now she is in politics. So I would like to really congratulate ma'am, and also would like to really thank on behalf of National Law University and Sarkari School. She at least gave her precious time, and we would like to hear from you, ma'am. And over to you, ma'am.
Kunti, I would just, on behalf of National Law University Odisha, I would also welcome Madam Aparajita Sarangi. There are few officers whom people know by name in the whole country, and Madam is probably one of them. Everybody knew that how Madam worked in as an IAS officer in different capacity, and we have a great hope as a member of parliament also that Madam would work with full dedication and will improve the situation in the Cuttack and Bhubaneswar and other constituencies. So, Madam, thank you so much for joining this program on right to education. Ma'am, you have to unmute yourself.
हेलो मैम, आपका माइक म्यूट है। हेलो अपराजिता मैम, माइक अनम्यूट है।
I think Anjali, you can.
Anjali, you can
give a
text
call.
or you
can
can call.
You can text
Yes,
or you
ma'am.
can
Yes,
call,
ma'am.
ma'am.
Yes, ma'am.
A very good morning to all of you and namaskar.
Good morning, ma'am.
And
Namaskar, ma'am.
yes, I thank the Vice Chancellor, Sri Jogesh Pratap Singh ji, and the anchor for making my day. Such kind words in the morning. I'm really humbled. I just try to do my duty wherever I am, and I try to put in my best. I give my 100%, and that's all. No more, no less. So I gratefully acknowledge the kind words showered on me by both of you. Now, let me tell you, I just couldn't have said no to this webinar because it talks of education. When one of your friends, your esteemed colleague, approached me and asked me to kind of appear in this, I couldn't have said no because it was all about education. And education is something which is the backbone of society. And for that matter, I am emotionally attached with one assignment that I have done in my career of 25 years in the Indian Administrative Service, and that is Secretary School Education and Secretary Higher Education. I can never thank God enough for having put me in these two assignments when I was in the IAS. I have benefited a lot, I have learned a lot from everybody with whom I have come across, whether the members of Teachers Association or the students. I have learned a lot and I have really felt very much enriched. My dear friends, having jumped to politics, having jumped to a very different platform, wherever I go, people throw different kinds of questions at me. Sometimes there are bouquets, sometimes there are brickbats, there are hundreds of questions. But one question deeply touched me, which came from a student of class 12th in a school in Bhubaneswar. He just asked me, Madam, you have been in the IAS, now you are in politics. What do you think is the most important, most significant nation building activity? And you know, I took just 30 seconds to respond, and I don't know how I responded. I just spoke from my heart and I said, a particular period in a class, whether it is for 45 minutes or 50 minutes or 1 hour, when the teacher interacts with the student, whether in a school or in a college, is the most important nation building activity. Whatever we may do, you or me, anybody, I think this is the most important work that is done for the society, for the nation. It's extremely important for all of us to ensure that this 45 minutes or this 50 minutes is power packed and is able to deliver the maximum. There is tremendous output of this 45 minutes. I think all of us, whether we are in the policymakers group or whether we are the executives, whether we are the students, I think all of us in the nation must think on this line. We have to really improve the quality of delivery and maximize the output of this 45 minutes. My dear friends, 4th August 2009, right? 2010, 4th August 2010, the Right to Education Act was passed by the Parliament. After a lot of debate, the then UPA government was there and the act was passed. We are one of the 135 countries which actually announced to the world that education was a fundamental right. We were not just the first one, we were among 135 countries. And I'm really proud of the fact that I was also in the consultative committee when the Right to Education Act was being drafted by the Ministry of School Education and the Ministry of Higher Education at Government of India level. Now, I'm very grateful to the Vice Chancellor Yogesh Pratap Singh ji, very rightly and very beautifully and very cogently, he has put before us the salient features of the Right to Education Act. We are all aware of what it was. 10 years have passed and we are celebrating this decade of the implementation of Right to Education Act. I'm talking to you not as a person belonging to a party opposed to the UPA. I'm talking to you as a citizen of India. I'm talking to you as one of you who is not involved in any kind of politics. We are all citizens of India, and as I told you, education is extremely important. Before I start, I would like to say 3-4 lines of Dr. Sarvapalli Radhakrishnan. You know, education is just not learning by rote. Education is not just the learning of 3 letters. Education, he said, education to be complete must be humane. It must include not only the training of intellect, but also the refinement of heart and discipline of spirit. We have to ensure that through education, we are able to transform human beings into holistic personalities. That is what education is all about. It is not just training of intellect. It is much beyond that. My dear friends, Right to Education, as you know, it focused completely on the age group of 6 to 14, free and compulsory education, no detention, we are all aware of. There was tremendous focus on teacher-pupil ratio, on infrastructure creation, on teachers training. All these things were part of the Right to Education Act and they are being implemented. Now, 10 years down the line, as a citizen of India, let's ask ourselves, where are we? Where are we? I just heard the Vice Chancellor, he rightly mentioned that the upper primary enrollment went up by 19.43% or say 20%. I entirely agree. Now, there is a difference between enrollment and retention. Whether we were able to retain, whether there is a way of tracking the retention. I was going by some of the DICE reports, you know, the District Survey Education Report. I was going through some of the DICE reports. There is absolutely no way of tracking the retention part. Enrollment, yes, we have done phenomenally well in enrollment. Gross enrollment ratio has really gone up. And I tell you, it's 10 plus 2. Now, in the National Education Policy, we are talking of 5 plus 3 plus 3 plus 4. We are all aware of that. But at that point of time, it was 6 to 14, right? Right from class 1 to class 8. Gross enrollment ratio in the primary stage, right from class 1 to class 5, went up phenomenally high. Upper primary, 6 and 7 and 8, little less, but yes, 20% as we discussed right now. But the issue is retention. I will not like to dwell on the salient features. I would not like to be repetitive, but I would definitely like to point out certain issues. You know, at that point of time when I was Secretary of Education and I was sitting in one of the meetings with the government, and I had suggested that to ensure that in Odisha, all children who pass out from the Anganwadi centers, or rather who cross the Anganwadi center threshold, 6 years, 3 to 6 is Anganwadi preschool, you know that. So beyond 6 years, all of them should go to the nearest primary school. And it will be good if we have the Anganwadi center within the premises of a primary school. I hope you understand. The idea was all these children of Anganwadi centers go to the primary school. 100% enrollment in the primary school in class 1. And I'm really delighted to tell you that at that point of time, the government took my suggestion very positively. And thereafter, there was a time when all the Anganwadi centers in the state, after our meeting and the decisions taken by the government, we started constructing the Anganwadi centers within the school premises. But the challenge was, after class 5, the upper primary, many of the places, the upper primary is not part of the primary. Upper primary would be some other building somewhere. There would be a strict dropout. Dropout rates went up, and the girls especially were the dropouts. They would not go to the upper primary school. That was the challenge. After 10 years, having looked at the infrastructure, tremendous infrastructure came up. One of the salient features, very important salient feature I would say, was within every 1 kilometer radius of a habitation, there must be a primary school, right? And within a radius of 3 kilometers, there should be an upper primary school. I'll go just beyond that also, that's not the subject of discussion today. Under the Rashtriya Madhyamik Shiksha Abhiyan, within 5 kilometers radius, that is almost in one panchayat, there would be a high school also. So there, I tell you, the flip side of it, there was tremendous focus on infrastructure creation. And I, as Secretary Education, had been given the responsibility of ensuring that whatever money came from Government of India was spent properly, and within that 1 kilometer and 3 kilometer radius, we had schools everywhere. Mushrooming of schools, I must say. Mushrooming everywhere. Now, while doing that, I think it was an implementation flaw. I can look back now. The teachers were less. So the spread of teachers was very less. We had to recruit more number of teachers because we increased the number of buildings. And there was sparsely populated areas. I want you all to think through. Those who are listening to me, please think through. Please think through. I love these two words, think through. While I talk, you imagine, what am I saying? It's very easy to, mug up figures. It's very easy to, go through the salient features and to say the disadvantages and advantages. I want you all to think through. The teachers were less in number. Schools were many. And the schools were not equipped well enough. We had to have proper infrastructure within every school. Right? So these things were missing all through. And then we kept on, doing this MDM thing. We brought in, we went for drinking water facilities. We went for additional classrooms. So I think all these things happened, but there was less focus on equipping these schools, the soft components. Unless and until, that is my very humble experience in these 25 years and even now in politics, all of us need to be very careful about both the components in anything that we do. Always there are two components in all our works. One is the hardware and the other is the software. We just can't focus on hardware and be content. We have to focus on the software too, the soft components. What are the soft components in education? If you ask me, hardware, yes, it's very easy to get. Very easy to get a laboratory, very easy to have a building done, very easy to have a pipe water supply or a tube well done, very easy to have some laboratory equipments, as I mentioned, blackboards done, teaching aid materials done. But yes, then what is a soft component? Soft component is the quality aspect of it. Whether the teachers have been properly trained, whether that 45 minutes is quality packed, whether the children are benefiting, whether we are able to communicate to the children what we want to communicate, whether there is holistic empowerment of children. What is education? Education is nothing but ensuring empowerment, ensuring capacitation. Education helps us to lead our life in a better manner. Right? So are we doing that? So for that matter, though there was focus on teachers training in right to education, it was not implemented in letter and spirit, whatever may be the reason. And one reason I can only say I could feel, because I was at the executing point, there was always this unnecessary tug of war between the center and the state governments. So state governments had to put in certain amount of funds. It was a centrally sponsored program. So naturally center giving and state giving. So center would give, then state would not give, right? So this was the problem. So financial crunches actually marred the implementation part of it to a great extent. Number one. Number two, in the parliament also today, I keep telling, whenever a new bill comes to become an act by the passage in the both houses of the parliament, one major thing which I always say, much to the consternation, much to the disapproval of many of my colleagues, I always say it's very easy to pass bills. It's very easy to frame acts. It's very easy to frame regulations. The most important thing is whether we are able to implement these in the right manner. There is a plethora of laws, rules, regulations, acts. Are we able to do justice to them? The national education policy has come now. I'm very humbly informing you that I was kind of, part of the whole drafting process again. And we had to put in as member of parliament some of our suggestions in the parliament when this was kind of, taken up. Of course, this is a policy. This was not brought to the parliament for passage, but the suggestions of members of parliament had been. National education policy is a very ambitious one, tremendous focus on vocational education, tremendous focus on usage of technology, right? We are talking of artificial intelligence, we are talking of genetic engineering, we are talking of robotics, we are talking of genomics. Everything is there in the national education policy. You just go through that. It's a marvelous piece to read. As far as right to education is concerned, down the line, I have a feeling that the implementation part could have been better. After 10 years, I can only say that we did a lot as far as infrastructure was concerned. We did a lot as far as enrollment ratio increase was concerned. Cross enrollment ratio went up. We actually failed on the quality part of it. Have you seen the ASA reports? I always go through the ASA reports whenever it is published. Are we moving forward in the same manner as other countries are doing? I think there is a tremendous deficit somewhere, tremendous deficit. So I think instead of, and this NEP, let me tell you, I forgot to mention, this NEP has come after 34 years. The last one was 1986, the education policy. And now we have the new education policy now after 34 years. This particular government went back, talked about the last policy of 1986, and then now it has come up with the NEP, which is a wonderful document. And I entirely agree with Yogendra Pratap Singh ji that it all boils down to how well we implement it. Again, the center and state tug of war should not take place. Number one. Number two, there should not be paucity of funds anywhere, right? Friends, a very small thing. I'm just going away from the usual focusing on the right to education. I want you all to think through. Let's all be as innovative as possible, as innovative. Think out of the box. It's very easy to take an act or a policy and implement it in letter and spirit, 10 blackboards here, 2 classrooms there. That's not the way. That's not the way. Let's be slightly different, innovative. I'll just give you an example of what we did. It's never I in my case, it's always the team which is performing so very well. I have always been a part of a good team. I remember when we were implementing here in Orissa, one day we had been to Raigada district. Initially, I think 1 month of my joining as the secretary of the department. And suddenly the parents there, I have a wonderful, I love to interact with people. So I sat in one of the villages and I was talking to the women there. And I said, why don't you send your children to school? And they were very candid about it. They said, what do we get in school? Nothing is there. Our children go and come back. It's a dilapidated building. Our children don't like the look of the building. Friends, let me tell you, that very day in the evening, I had a special meeting, an emergency meeting with all the district functionaries of Raigada. We sat there and I asked them, what's this problem? Parents don't want to send their children to our school. We are giving them MDM. We have also started giving them textbooks. We are giving them free uniforms. What's the problem? That very day, one old person came and said, Madam, please make your schools attractive. And that was the answer I was looking for. Attractive. Anything which is attractive is something which makes us go there, isn't it? So what we did was we tried to color our schools, paint our schools, bring all the tribal paintings of Odisha, make all the classrooms very beautiful out of the funds given by the government of India to each school, school headmaster. We started doing that all across the state. In the next 3-4 months, all schools
I think मैडम का डिस्टर्ब हो गया नेटवर्क.
I think there is some network issues or network glitches on her part, I guess. Anjali, could you please
Yes,
text
ma'am.
ma'am?
Ma'am, we are
Give
trying
us
to
some.
contact.
Yeah. Anjali, did you have a word with ma'am?
Yes, ma'am, we are having just
Yeah.
Ma'am, Parajita ma'am is joining in a while. She had some battery issues with her laptop.
Okay.
हेलो हाँ भाई कनेक्ट हो गला
Do I continue? Or
Yes,
somebody
ma'am.
else is speaking? Yes. So there was
No,
a
ma'am.
technology
Yes,
fails us. Technology fails us. We are very emotional about a particular thing. I think all of us are very emotional about education. I'm
true,
sorry.
true.
I actually got
No,
disconnected.
no issues.
मैं कह रही थी कि किसी भी क्षेत्र में अच्छा काम करने के लिए साधना की जरूरत है, साधन आ जाते हैं, साधना चाहिए. I have a feeling that as far as implementation of the Right to Education Act is concerned, I think somewhere or the other, we did not put in as much effort as we should have. Center and state should have worked together. There should have been no financial constraint anywhere on anybody's part. And there should have been a very sincere implementation on the ground. But yes, 10 years have passed, and I think we will be doing much more now that the national education policy has also come into place. This will all be in sync with each other. If you ask me to go by the data, why am I saying that we did not do as much as we should have done in these 10 years? I'll just go by the District Information System of Education data. Only 13% of all schools in India have achieved full compliance with the RTE norms. Only 13% of the schools in the country have actually complied with the RTE norms. Now, this is something which we really need to be concerned about. Government schools, government aided schools, I think all, and also the private schools, we really need to be concerned about this. If you ask me, what was the most important aspect of the Right to Education Act and what is? I would say this 25% children within 1 kilometer radius going in of the EWS category, economically weaker sections category, going to the schools, whether private school or government aided school, whatever it is, all the private schools had been asked to take this 25% in their class, whatever the population, these 25% should belong to the EWS category. And this actually worked well. Many places it worked very well. And I'm extremely happy to inform you that here we did good job. 3.3 million students secured admission to the EWS category. 3.3 million. So here I think we did well. There was absolutely no concern about the social strata of the child, the economic situation of the child, the parental occupation. All children within 1 kilometer radius of a high sounding private school would get admission in the private school in class 1. And I remember when I was Secretary Education, I would move with a big lathi in my hand telling all the private schools to get the children. There would be many schools would not want, but I would be behind them, you know. So I think this is something which where we have done well. We have done well on infrastructure. We have done well on gross enrollment ratio. We have come very badly failed, or rather fared very poorly on the quality front. The ASA reports can tell us. We need to have good training of the teachers, more number of teachers, and good salary package for the teachers. I'm a strong votary of good returns for the teacher. If it is 7th pay commission, all should get 7th pay commission. Absolutely no policy of appeasement when teacher recruitment is done. Friends, I'll ask you a question. When there is a recruitment by the Defense Department for the Army, for the Navy, for the Air Force, is there any kind of compromise on the quality? Can we afford that? Can the nation afford that? If not, if we are talking of the most important nation building activity, and that is teaching, how can we compromise on the quality of teachers? So I think we have to have the best of people as the teachers. My parents were teachers, one high school teacher and one college teacher. Whatever I am today is because of the sanskar and the teaching that I received from my parents. So I think it's extremely important to have good teachers in schools and colleges. Absolutely no compromise on quality. And I'm extremely serious when I say that the recruitment procedure must be as tough as possible. It should be as tough as, say, Indian Administrative Service or Defense or any other space. These are all very difficult examinations. You know this. This should be as difficult. But for that matter, we need to give proper remuneration to the teachers. Their working conditions should be very favorable to them. So I think there has been less focus on teachers training. There has been less focus on proper teacher recruitment procedures in place. I remember we had gone for a small kind of innovation, which worked well for some time. What we did was, we tried to bring out teachers teaching manuals for the classrooms. Now, let me explain what it was. Teachers teaching manuals, not training. I'm saying teaching manuals. Teaching manuals means all the subjects, whatever number of subjects being taught to the children, say 8 subjects are being taught to the children, which particular chapter will be consuming how many number of periods, and what would be the expected outcome of that chapter. That means, what should a child learn from that chapter? So a teacher, there were series of meetings with the teachers. I remember teachers associations. The teachers actually drafted that teachers training manual, teachers teaching manual. And they said that, okay, the light chapter in physics will have 4 periods. Then a particular person will say, no, we require 8 periods. Fine, there will be 8 periods. So these 8 periods, then again we would break down each particular period, what would be taught. And at the end of each chapter, there would be assessment. Students' assessment exercise. Whether the children have actually understood what was being conveyed by the teachers in those 8 periods on the light chapter. So I think we had this teacher teaching manual, and that worked very well in Odisha. Extremely well, and it had been drafted by the Teachers Association, and it was very easy for them to kind of implement these. So I think these are some innovations that we can think of as we go. My dear friends, we have talked of many things. I'm deeply interested in the concept of the school management committee in the elementary schools, in the school management and development committee in the high schools, SMDC and SMC. We are talking of SMC when we are talking of right to education. SMC plays a wonderful role with many of the SMC members as women, mothers. Extremely important to have SMC associated with the running of the school. The SMC will ensure that there is attendance, there is regular attendance, and let me honestly tell you, as we have in private schools, in government schools also, in government aided schools also, we should have parent-teacher meeting. So it would be SMC ensuring that there is a parent-teacher meeting. Every parent of a rural area, a mother, a father, must know what the child is doing, whether the child is learning or not. In fact, extremely important to associate the parents with the education process. This actually helps. So I think this was a landmark thing which happened due to the Right to Education Act. And I think all these state governments, not only Odisha, all these state governments must actually activate the SMCs and the SMDCs. Vocational education is another thing I bat for hugely. We have to equip children for life. Suppose a child is not very good in mathematics or English or Hindi, but he can be or she can be a good carpenter, a good plumber. What's wrong? Catch them young. Maybe class 6, class 7, then that's what the NEP is going to do this time. Immediately after class 6, there would be an assessment. A child who is not interested in learning can always go to the other side. Absolutely no problem. We should not have rigidity in our dealing with the entire education process. Let's not be rigid. Let's not be rigid. A child who wants to, this rigidity is something which destroys many of the implementation processes. So I think let us not be rigid. The best part about this NEP thing which has come now is the emphasis on vocational education. Catch them young immediately in class 6 and hone their skills in that sector. I'm sure they would do very well. So I think these are the areas that we really need to work on. And as I told you, all of us should focus on making our children holistic human beings, good members of the society, and only the nation can move forward. This is what I had to say about the right to education, and I also try to kind of link it up with the new education policy. Thank you very much, Sarkari School, National Law University, Qatar, and all the organizers. Education is my first love, and you gave me this opportunity to be associated with you today. Thank you so much. Namaskar.
Thank you so much, ma'am. It was indeed a pleasure to hear you on, very pertinent aspects of education. Indeed, I really had a wish so that I can talk to you in person regarding, because I have had a lot of good, experiences. I have heard many things that you have done actually in the higher education. So I really feel, at least personally, me, I feel, and also National Law University Odisha, we are really honored by your presence. And I second you
Thank you.
when you say about, the think through thing and the objective of thinking through and, the innovative teaching out of box ideologies that we should adopt. And when you say about the soft components in school, that is something which is, because in the legal aid society, we are much concerned about the field study, and we have a empirical strategy to work in the field, and we visit different schools, we visit different brick clinics, we have different other clinics, and we have established different clinics, 6 to 7 clinics in our university, one of which is right to education. So when we have visited the nearby schools and in the adopted villages, we have really found that, this the infrastructures, they have really been developed to a greater extent, and it really looks beautiful. And the area near Katak, and even places where we have brick lanes in the tribal settlements, in the clusters, they are really beautiful. But as far when really you talk about the soft components, the quality teaching, and the quality of teachers, it is, I would say, the word is appalling. We don't find good teachers. The student teacher ratio is really very bad. And but when you say about the parent teachers meeting, I really feel good that I teach my son in a private school, we can afford the things. But the people who are from a lower strata, from the cluster communities, the tribal clusters, they also have a right to know what is their son or the girl or the daughter, they are reading, what they are up to. So at least there should be an involvement of the parents, either parents, in the education of the child. I really, it's really an honor, ma'am, to be, to have you with us. And we would really wish that post COVID we would
Thank you.
welcome you in our university in person.
Welcome.
And thank you so
Okay.
much for your
Thank you
presence,
so
ma'am.
much. And I'll
Thank you
take
so
leave,
much.
and all the best to all of you. All the best to all of
Thank,
you. Thank you so
thank you
much.
so much.
Namaskar.
Thank you so much, ma'am.
बंद करो.
So, friends, and I would like to welcome our next panelist, Dr. Aruna Sri Lakshmi, Chairperson, Academic Coordination Committee, a very beloved teacher of all of us. She has been, I won't say a keen researcher, I won't start with a keen researcher, but really a person who is in love with working empirically. She has a love for, working in the field of child labor, education, right to education. She has been actively engaged in the teaching of children, the child labor, the brick lane children. So, Aruna ma'am, she has been an authority of labor law, and we really look up to her. And it's an honor, ma'am, to have you here in this conference. and we would like to hear something from you. Over to you, Aruna ma'am.
Thank you, Kunti. I hope my voice is audible. I'm
Yes,
audible?
ma'am, it is audible. Yeah, it is audible, ma'am.
Yeah. A very good morning to all the distinguished dignitaries who are participating in this national conference on right to education, and my wishes to our Vice Chancellor in charge, Yogesh Pratap Singh, and Madam Aparajita, Madam Member of Parliament, whom we have witnessed the powerful message she has given to all of us. And she made us think through. And when now we have to be silent and start thinking as to how we can implement the Right to Education Act. And an introspection in our travel down the lane 10 years with respect to the passing of the Right to Education Act, which is the need of the hour today. I thank the Legal Aid Society for taking initiative in collaboration with the sarkarischool.in and invited me to be a part of it. Having heard to our Vice Chancellor and Madam, I have not much to deliberate in the first session because the themes that have been given are still awaited to be heard to. But however, I'll take to a little developments that have taken place in the Right to Education Act. And before I go into that, I have a very strong faith in a quote which says, God is never disappointed when he brings a child into the world. It says every child that comes into the world comes with a message that God is not yet disappointed. Therefore, child has the potential, child is need to be nurtured, and the development of the child is what we look forward. And going to the UNCRC has brought these ideals into reality by having a convention for ourselves where it recognized child's right to survival, child's right to development, child right to participation, and a right against exploitation. These four have been the main themes with which India has ratified. And before we venture into knowing about the developments that have taken place, I think this is a right time we have to acknowledge the efforts made by many great people prior to the independence, which stood as a precursor, where the universal elementary education was insisted. The provincial governments and the provincial states have brought out certain enactments where they provided that children should be given free and compulsory education, and some states have also insisted for girls education, so which is really laudable. And later on we found that the judiciary proactive decisions which read Article 21, right to life, includes many other things, and one important right is right to education, right from TMA Pi Foundation case, and then the Unni Krishnan case we have seen through, and converting the directive principles of state policy into the fundamental right, as our Vice Chancellor has already deliberated, into Article 21A, which has strongly now given a right to the children a free and compulsory education. Now, when we look back to we are all aware, just to recapitulate, we are all aware that we have certain rights have been created to children under the Right to Education Act. And most importantly, we have the rights relating to their free and compulsory education. Then they have a right to admission, class appropriate to the age, and a right to transfer, right of 25% reservation for them for the economic and backward and weaker sections, and they cannot be denied of admission, and they cannot be detained in the classes where they are studying, and there cannot be any physical punishment or any harassment that can happen, and some remedy is also provided along with the role of the teachers, responsibility of the teachers, and certain important goals that have been set under the Right to Education Act, which was passed in 2009. Now later in 2012, as we are aware, certain amendments have taken place where they said right of child to free and compulsory education, barring 29, section 29 with respect to the curriculum, and section 30, that is completion of the elementary education. Now these completing the compulsory education has been one of the important goals with which the right to education has been passed. So they made it specific with regard to that, and the children are conferred now with the right to education, subjecting them to section 29 and 30 of the Act. And they have also exempted by virtue of this Amendment Act some of the Vedic Pathshalas and the educational institutions primarily imparting religious instructions. And they have included the child with disability into the Act, that is persons with disabilities Act who are considered to be disabled under Act of 1995, and also the National Trust for Welfare of Persons Act, people dealing with the autism and cerebral palsy. They have been brought under the purview of the definition of the child, and this amendment was also affected. And with regard to the minority and religious institutions that are going to deal with, the school management committees shall perform their duties. Their function would be only advisory in nature, and the teacher pupil ratio that has to be rectified within the period of 3 years. And they have also inserted one new section under the Act, 2012 Act, section 39, where it says central government has to remove all these difficulties which are there with respect to the Right to Education Act within a period of 3 years. Now later we find another development in 2017, where it has added one more proviso to section 23, stating that the teacher who have been on position by the 31st March 2015, whatever minimum qualifications they have to comply with, the time limit that has been given was 4 years. For others, it was 5 years. And then we find that an important amendment that has taken place in the year 2019. Now this 2019, it was to rebuild the educational institutions and the system, and to remove some kind of adverse effects in the learning levels. They said they can conduct the regular examinations to the classes 5 and 8, and if the child fails in the examination, within 2 months examination shall be conducted, and even then if the child is not able to clear the examination, the state government is empowered to take a decision whether the child shall be promoted or detained. Now this is one glaring difference we find under the RTE 2009 Act and the 2019 enactment that has the amendment that has taken place. Now with these few changes, the new educational policy now that we are with, as we know that it has categorized into foundational literacy and the preschooling learning, categorize them, and it firmly wanted to travel towards a competency based assessment in the schools, and there is government standards setting in the schools, and the most importantly it is the curriculum pedagogy and those reforms that are to be brought. This is one important area I find very crucial in the development of the child, because section 29 of the RTE Act thrusts upon one aspect of it, that is the curriculum development, where the child has to be imbibed with the constitutional values. Now, this is one missing element we find in the schools, where not much thrust is being given. Now, what are these constitutional aims or the values that we want to impart to the child? What we are talking about, the holistic development, is what exactly it is going to address upon. So I consider them on three levels. One is the constitutional values, the second one is the ethical values, the third one is the moral values, which is the most neglected part of it in the schools, which requires a very serious attention when a child is being nurtured from class 1. As they said, the involvement of the child in the various practical activities should involve and lead the child to the aspect of their moral values in the person. That is very important, that is going to develop him in a more a better citizen. Now, what are these constitutional values we are talking about? Now, what we talk about, the liberty, how much liberty a child has to use. What does he mean by equality? What does he mean by dignity? So these are all the unity. Unity is one missing element that we find in the nation, right? Amongst all of us, this is what we lack: unity and fraternity. These are the two important constitutional values that are set in the preamble of the Constitution, which is very silently kept apart. We concentrate only on justice, equality, and liberty. Right? The unity and the fraternity is what we have to thrust upon today, to see that a child is properly developed and learn to live in a society among the people, to live down to the core of the people, to know, understand the problems of the people, to render community service to the people. Now, these are all what we aspire to bring about in the child. Now, when we talk about the ethical values, again, it talks about the integrity of a child, the transparency he should maintain, the accountability he should have, the impartiality he should have, and the public welfare and the equity which he has to maintain in the society is also to be imbibed to the child. And the moral values, as I said, the character building, what we are finding these words in the national educational policies. This character building is possible only when at the personal level a student is honest, a student is truthful for himself, a student is upright in his behavior. If a student has honesty in his acts, if a student is dutiful, discharges his duty to the fullest extent, as madam has said, give your 100% best to whatever act you do, only then the moral values are going to be nurtured in a child. Now, this is one aspect I would like to and the other aspect we find in the national educational policy is the education ecosystem, where the institution has to link up with the parents, with the students, as well as the teachers, to establish a proper, balanced, healthy educational environment. Now, if we look at there is an academic audit that was conducted in 2017, where they have identified some of the gaps in the implementation of the RTE Act. One is with respect to the poor financial internal control, where the funds are not going to be, were not properly used. And the second one is where are the deviations in the Right to Education Act. So as madam said, the retention part. Admission is okay, but the retention is becoming a very difficult part, and the parallelly the need for economic support by the child and putting the child into the child labor activities is another part which brings down the child from the school to the labor. Though the Act has, under the Child Labor Amendment, Adolescent and Amendment Act, also it has balanced and defined a child as defined under the RTE Act. There is a harmonious construction that has taken place in the Act. But still, in reality, when we go to the field trips and all, we find that the every parent who is sending the child to the labor is only concerned about the income that the child is going to add to the family compared to the education that they are going to get from going to the school. So this is one particular aspect where parents need to be empowered, and this empowering requires a lot of commitment. So the role and responsibility of the teacher, it must start from within, where the teacher starts loving the child and see that the child grows under his guidance to a particular extent, because whatever water is there in the tank, the same water comes in the tap. Similarly, whatever the teacher tells, the same becomes the teacher becomes the role model for a student. So therefore, the deviations that they have identified in the academic audit in 2017 was with respect to the non-maintenance of the records, and the children above 14 are being retained. And the third one is schools are run without recognition, and there is inadequate teacher pupil ratio. Similarly, they have suggested for how to overcome all these difficulties, and then so that we will be able to implement them properly. I think Madam Usha Khare, who is going to be a panelist here, I was hearing to her school and how she was complying with the school and what effort she is making in that particular aspect is really laudable. I was really inspired, where she has categorically shown as to how you can bring up a school in a proper way with visionary, with full focus on the child, where you encourage the child full potential to be developed during the school days in the school, where they rise to heights. Right? Though there are few challenges that are there, one important challenge is with respect to the honesty and hard working and the passion to develop the child is one important aspect. The right to education through training has to impart to the teachers who are there, and the freedom to work and recognition, and they enjoy the work that they are going to do. So as we know that education, whatever we are talking, should be available, it should be accessible, it should be acceptable, and it should be adaptable. So all these would be possible only when the commitment by each and every stakeholder is there in the given society. And I do not want to take much of your time because already I think we are running late for the second session. But however, we need to keep in mind that now we have traveled from the place where we want to instill the importance of education into the minds of the people. We have traveled 10 years and we have seen the development that has taken place, and now we are moving with a next step ahead where we want to take the child along with us, develop the child in a holistic manner, in a more better equipped child, and with the digital economy that is coming, to develop the competencies of the child. And the role and responsibility of the teacher is going to be very crucial in this particular mission that a teacher is going to hold. So that education which is taught for life is what we require. Education should be for life, but not for mere living. So this character building is possible through these, and the government, state government, central government have been making efforts, and we will have to wait and test to the time where we reach our mission and goal of the right to education. Thank you. With these few words, I would like to take this.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you so much for elucidating the values that we need, and also underlining the moral values, the ethical values, the constitutional values of education, and also the deviating principles that we would need to sustain a quality education. And we are really elated to hear your words on education. So I would like to sum up this session just with a single sentence, that education is needed purposefully. The purpose of education is to ensure empowerment, to ensure capacitation. As Madam Aprajita Sarangi has rightly mentioned, certain ambits that we need to look upon, that we need to focus upon. So with this, I think we come to the end of the inaugural session for the conference. And over to you, Anjali and Abhishek, for the further work of the conference. And thank you so much. Thank you so much, ma'am, for your presence. Thank you so much, Yogesh sir, for your esteemed presence in the inaugural session.
Thank you, Kunti, Nikita, Anjali, Aruna ma'am.
Thank you, sir.
All the
you,
best
sir.
for next session.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so
Thank you
much.
so much, sir. Thank you so much. सभी मैम को भी स्पेशली थैंक यू सर, अपराजिता मैम को, और आपके आने से काफी हमारा एक मान बढ़ा, और आपके वर्ड्स जो है हमें बहुत इंस्पायर करेंगे, हमें बहुत कुछ करने के लिए प्रेरित करेंगे, और पूरी टीम के लिए, दोनों टीम की तरफ से आपको थैंक यू सो मच सर. थैंक यू.
Thank you.
So we will start the first session with Mr. संदीप जोशी एंड डॉक्टर अमित चंद्रा. हमारे साथ निकिता मैम है, और आप सेशन को मॉडरेट करें. यस.